He had been working in the mansion for years, quietly moving through the rooms with a mop and a bucket, a dusting cloth in one hand and a small brush in the other. The grand estate was enormous, full of rooms that gleamed under crystal chandeliers, and hallways lined with expensive paintings and marble floors that reflected the sunlight pouring in through large windows. Most of the people living there barely noticed him as he went about his work, and he preferred it that way. He liked being invisible, slipping into corners, and doing his job without interruption. Today was no different. He moved through the drawing room, dusting the furniture and straightening the curtains, listening to the faint sounds of birds outside and the gentle hum of the central air conditioning. The mansion was quiet, as it often was during the late morning hours. Only a few staff members were around, some tending to the garden, others preparing lunch in the massive kitchen. He enjoyed the calm, almost peaceful moments like this before. The mansion would fill with visitors, events, and noise. He had been assigned the music room for the morning. It was one of the most beautiful rooms in the entire house, and he approached it with a kind of reverence. The room was spacious, with tall windows on either side, letting in streams of sunlight that highlighted the polished wooden floor. Against the far wall sat a grand piano, its black lacquered surface shining so brightly it almost seemed like a mirror. The piano was enormous, a piece of furniture that could dominate an entire room if not placed correctly. Its keys were immaculate, pure white and black in a way that seemed almost unreal, and he had heard stories from other staff that the owner of the house treasured that piano more than anything else. He knew he had to be extra careful. He had seen a few new staff members stumble and make mistakes, and he had learned from their experiences that one wrong move around the piano could cause a lot of trouble. He rolled up his sleeves, adjusted his gloves, and began dusting the edges of the instrument. Every movement was slow and deliberate, almost as if he were tiptoeing, careful not to leave fingerprints or smudges. The sunlight falling on the polished surface created reflections that made it hard to see where the dust really was, but he persisted. He used a soft cloth, wiping gently, following the grain of the wood, making sure not to press too hard. As he worked, he thought about his life outside the mansion. He lived in a small apartment not far from the city, a simple place with a tiny kitchen and a balcony that overlooked a busy street. His life was quiet, ordinary, and mostly unnoticed by the world, just like his work at the mansion. Yet there was a small part of him that loved moments like this, when he could be surrounded by beauty and silence, even if he didn't belong to that world. The music room, with its grandeur and elegance, was like a little escape from his everyday life. He moved to the keys, carefully dusting between them. They felt smooth under his fingers, cold but inviting. For a moment he hesitated, afraid that even the slightest touch might be considered disrespectful. But the rhythm of cleaning, the repetition of wiping, brushing, and polishing, gave him a strange sense of calm. He leaned closer, noticing tiny details that most people wouldn't see: the faint scratches on the wood near the pedals, the delicate carvings on the legs of the piano, and the slight unevenness in some of the keys. Each detail told a story of the instrument's age and the hands that had played it over the years. He worked steadily, lost in the task. The sound of his cloth brushing over the polished wood was soft, almost musical in itself. He moved around the piano carefully, sometimes kneeling to reach the lower parts, sometimes standing to get a better view of the top. The room seemed to hold its breath, quiet and still, as if it were watching him. He felt a small thrill at being alone in such a magnificent space, surrounded by objects that had probably never been touched by anyone like him. Then, as he leaned over to reach the far side of the keys, his elbow accidentally nudged one of them. A single sharp note rang out, echoing through the otherwise silent room. He froze immediately, his heart pounding in his chest. The sound seemed so loud in the quiet space that it startled him, and for a moment he was sure someone would come, running in to scold him. His hands trembled slightly as he stepped back, expecting a voice to bark at him, a warning that he had overstepped, but the room remained silent. He exhaled slowly, trying to calm himself. He knew that no one had seen him, but the fear of making a mistake in a place like this was enough to make him sweat. He bent down to continue cleaning, more cautious than before, every movement now careful to avoid touching the keys accidentally. Still, a small part of him couldn't help but admire the sound that had escaped. It was a clear, clean note, almost pure, and it made him wonder briefly about the music that could come from the instrument if played properly. He continued with his cleaning, the incident leaving him slightly distracted. He moved around the piano, dusting the top and polishing the pedals, all the while listening to the soft sound of his cloth. The sunlight shifted across the room, creating patterns on the wooden floor, and he watched as the reflections danced along the polished surface of the piano. The beauty of the room and the instrument made him momentarily forget the world outside, the life he had, and the simplicity of his routine. For a brief period, he felt connected to something larger, something more artistic, more refined than his everyday existence. He paused for a moment, stepping back to look at the piano from a distance. The instrument seemed almost alive, its glossy surface reflecting the room in a way that made it feel like it belonged to another world entirely. He could see the faint fingerprints from previous use, small smudges that showed the hands of the musicians who had played it, and he felt a strange sense of respect for the people who had created such beauty. He imagined what it would be like to play a piece of music here, to fill the room with sound that matched its elegance. The thought was fleeting but powerful, and he quickly pushed it aside, returning to his cleaning dot. As he continued, he became aware of a slight movement behind him. He turned slightly, but saw nothing, only the sunlight streaming through the windows and the soft shadows cast by the furniture. He shook his head, assuming it was just his imagination. The mansion could be eerie in its silence, with its empty hallways and vast rooms, and he had learned long ago that he sometimes imagined things that weren't there. He returned to the piano, dusting and polishing with renewed care. Minutes passed, and the soft smell of polished wood and dust filled the room. He moved around the piano systematically, reaching every corner and surface. The repetition of his work became almost meditative, each movement deliberate and precise. He felt a sense of accomplishment in the small details, in the way the polished surfaces gleamed under the light, in the smoothness of the keys after he had carefully cleaned them. He enjoyed the satisfaction of a job well done, even if it went unnoticed by anyone else. Then, a sudden sound of footsteps outside the room made him freeze. He instinctively straightened up, glancing toward the door. The footsteps grew louder, deliberate and confident, and he knew someone was approaching. His heart began to race, thinking about the possibility of being caught near the piano, about what might happen if the owner entered and found him so close to such a valuable instrument. He swallowed hard, trying to calm his nerves. The door opened slowly, and he caught a glimpse of her before she stepped fully into the room. She was dressed in a stylish outfit, her posture straight, her expression one of curiosity mixed with a hint of irritation. She looked around the room, her eyes finally landing on him. For a moment, the room seemed to hold its breath again, the silence growing heavier, as if waiting to see what would happen next. He straightened, holding his cloth tightly, ready to apologize before she even spoke. His mind raced, thinking of the right words, the safest explanation, anything that could prevent a scene. Yet something in her gaze made him pause. It was not pure anger, nor was it immediate judgment. There was a spark of interest, a faint smile tugging at the corner of her lips, though she quickly suppressed it. She walked closer, her eyes never leaving him, and the tension in the room grew. He felt a strange mixture of fear and anticipation, unsure of what her reaction would be. The grand piano stood between them, silent and gleaming, a witness to the moment. He knew he had done nothing wrong intentionally, yet he felt the weight of the situation, as if the piano itself demanded respect and caution. The silence stretched, broken only by the faint sound of his breathing, until she finally spoke, her voice calm but firm, cutting through the tension like a knife. She stepped fully into the room, and he could see her face clearly now. She had sharp, confident eyes that seemed to study everything in the room, every corner and detail, as if nothing escaped her attention. Her expression was a mixture of curiosity and surprise, maybe even a hint of amusement, though he wasn't sure if she meant it kindly. She wore a well-tailored outfit, simple but elegant, reflecting the kind of life she led, a life far removed from his own. Every movement she made, the way she carried herself, spoke of someone who was used to having everything around her exactly as she wanted it. He straightened, gripping his cleaning cloth tightly, feeling suddenly self-conscious and out of place. Had always known that the staff and residents of the mansion lived in a world far different from his own. They were people with wealth and influence, surrounded by things he could only admire from a distance. And yet, he had learned to navigate this world quietly, keeping to himself, doing his work without attracting attention. Most of the time, he succeeded. Today, however, he could feel that invisible barrier between him and the residents breaking, at least for a moment. He was aware of every detail she might notice, the way he dressed, the way his hands moved, the nervous energy he tried to hide. "Did you just touch the piano?" she asked, her voice calm, but carrying an unmistakable edge of authority. It wasn't harsh, but it held a weight that made him want to answer carefully. He opened his mouth to explain, unsure how much he should say, and what words would be safe. "Yes, I was just cleaning it," he said, his voice low and steady, though his heart raced. "I didn't mean to touch the keys." "I was. Careful, I promise." She raised an eyebrow, stepping closer. He noticed how the sunlight caught in her hair, and how she seemed to move with a natural grace that was almost intimidating. "You were cleaning," she repeated, her tone neutral, almost as if she was testing him. "And yet, you accidentally hit a key. Do you know how delicate this instrument is?" He nodded quickly. "I know. I'm very careful. I've been here for a long time, and I would never do anything to damage it. I just want it to be clean and perfect, like it should be." There was a pause. She seemed to study him, her gaze sharp and discerning. He could feel the weight of her attention, and it made him shift slightly, unsure where to look. He tried to appear calm, to show that he belonged in this room at this moment, even if only as a caretaker of its beauty. Then she said something unexpected. "Can you play?" He froze. The question was so sudden, so out of context, that for a moment he couldn't answer. He had played before, yes, but never in front of anyone in this world. The piano had been a secret companion in his quieter moments, a private escape from a life that was ordinary and unnoticed. He looked at her, hesitating. I know a little," he admitted finally. "Not very well, just some pieces." Her eyes lit up, and he felt a strange shift in the room. There was curiosity now, almost excitement, in the way she looked at him. She moved closer to the piano, resting a hand lightly on its surface, not as an owner asserting possession, but as someone inviting him into her world. "Play something," she said simply. "Just a few notes." He swallowed hard. His hands hovered over the keys, trembling slightly. The room felt suddenly smaller, more intense, as if it were holding its breath with him. He took a deep breath and pressed a key. The note rang out, pure and clean, filling the quiet space with sound. He continued cautiously, moving through a few simple notes, his fingers remembering patterns he had played countless times before. The sound grew, small at first, then confident, and he realized the room had changed. It was no longer just a space filled with furniture and sunlight. It had become alive with music. She watched him, her expression unreadable, but her eyes focused. There was no mockery, no judgment, only a genuine interest that surprised him. He glanced at her briefly, trying to gauge her reaction. She nodded, slightly encouragingly, and he felt a surge of confidence. He played a few more notes, experimenting with a melody he had practiced in secret for years. The sound filled the room, resonating off the walls and the ceiling, and for a moment he forgot where he was, who was watching, and even the careful steps of his cleaning routine. The room's atmosphere shifted again. The tension that had been there when she first entered dissolved, replaced by a sense of amazement. Even he was surprised at how natural the music felt under his fingers, as if the piano itself wanted to speak through him. The sunlight glinted off the black surface, and the notes seemed to dance in the air, delicate but powerful. He stopped briefly, unsure whether to continue. She leaned closer to the piano, resting her hands lightly on the edge, her posture relaxed now. "Keep going," she said softly, almost like a friend rather than the owner of the room. He hesitated, then began again, letting the music flow. Each note was a step further into a world he had always admired from a distance, a world of sound, beauty, and attention. He felt his nerves melt away, replaced by a growing sense of connection, not just to the piano, but to her presence and the room itself. The sound of the music filled every corner, reaching the high ceilings and reflecting off the polished floor. He noticed the faint smile on her face now, the way her eyes softened as she listened. He had never seen someone watch him like this before, with quiet admiration and genuine interest. The fear that had gripped him when she first entered faded, replaced by a feeling of being recognized, not as a janitor or a stranger, but as someone capable of creating something beautiful. Minutes passed, though it felt like only seconds. He played a piece that he had practiced many times in solitude, the melody rising and falling, delicate yet confident. She leaned back slightly, crossing her arms, but she didn't interrupt. She let the music speak, letting him reveal himself. Through it, he could feel the room vibrating with the sound, and it gave him a strange sense of pride and humility at the same time. Finally, he ended the piece with a soft, lingering note. The room fell silent again, but the silence was different now. It was filled with respect, with unspoken appreciation. She clapped lightly, a genuine gesture, and he felt a warmth spread through him. Her eyes met his, and there was a connection, brief but undeniable. For a moment, the barriers between their worlds seemed to disappear. "You're very talented," she said, her voice steady and sincere. He felt a mix of embarrassment and pride. He had never expected anyone here to notice, let alone appreciate his playing. Most people in the mansion never spoke to him beyond necessary instructions, but here she was, acknowledging something that had been a part of him for years, something private and cherished. He nodded, unsure what to say. "Thank you," he murmured, feeling a little awkward but deeply moved. She smiled now, openly, a small but genuine gesture that made him feel at ease. "Why haven't you told anyone you could play?" she asked. Her tone was curious, not accusatory. He shrugged, a little sheepishly. "It's not important," he said. "I play for myself. It helps me think, helps me feel calm. I didn't expect anyone here to care." She tilted her head, considering him for a moment. "I care," she said simply. "Not everyone gets to see talent like this. It's a gift, and gifts should be shared, even if just sometimes." He felt a lump in his throat. He had spent so much of his life in quiet work, unnoticed, unseen, and now, in this moment, someone who lived in a world so different from his own recognized him for who he really was. He didn't know what to say, so he simply nodded, feeling grateful and a little overwhelmed. She stepped closer to the piano again, this time resting her hands lightly on the polished wood, almost touching him with her presence. "Would you play for me again?" she asked softly, a quiet challenge in her tone. He hesitated, then allowed himself a small smile. He had never imagined being asked to perform in front of anyone here, but something about her confidence, her curiosity, and her genuine interest made him feel like he could. He began again, letting the music flow more freely this time, less cautious, more expressive. The notes rose and fell, telling a story without words, and she listened intently, her eyes following his hands as they moved across the keys. The sunlight seemed to shine brighter, reflecting off the surface, illuminating both of them in a warm, golden glow. The room was no longer just a music room. It was a space where two people from very different worlds, connected through something deeper than wealth or status through music itself. As he played, he noticed her expression changing. She was no longer just a rich girl watching the janitor. She was someone who appreciated art, someone who understood the effort, the skill, and the emotion behind every note. He felt a sense of pride he had never experienced before, not in his work at the mansion, not in any part of his ordinary life. This was different. This was recognition of his true self, a glimpse of a world he had only imagined in quiet moments. When he finally stopped, the room was silent again, filled with the echo of the last note. She remained still for a moment, then smiled, genuine and warm. "That was beautiful," she said. "I didn't expect this at all." He looked down at his hands, feeling a little self-conscious. "Thank you," he whispered. "I didn't think anyone would care." She shook her head slightly, as if correcting him. "I care. And I think others should care too. Talent like yours shouldn't stay hidden." He felt a surge of emotion. He could not name gratitude, surprise, hope. He had never expected anyone to take an interest in his playing, let alone someone who lived in a world so different from his own. After she had complimented him, a quiet sense of pride lingered in his chest. The room, which had moments ago felt intimidating and overwhelming, now seemed more welcoming. He realized that music could bridge gaps between worlds, that even someone as far removed from him as she was could connect with the emotions he expressed through the piano. He looked at her again, noticing small details he had missed before, the way her eyes softened when she smiled, the slight tilt of her head when she listened, and the calm, attentive way she moved around the room. She seemed genuinely interested, not just in the music, but in him, the person behind it. It was a feeling he had rarely experienced, and it made his heart beat a little faster. She moved to a chair near the piano and sat down gracefully, watching him with curiosity. "Have you always played?" she asked, her voice gentle but full of interest. He hesitated, then nodded. "Yes, for a long time. Mostly when I was alone. It's been my way of thinking, of feeling things I can't say in words." Her eyes brightened. "I understand that," she said softly. "Music is like that. It's not just notes. It's emotion, life. It's how people speak when words aren't enough." He felt a deep connection in her words, as if she truly understood. Something about him that no one else ever had. He nodded, smiling faintly, unsure if he could put into words what he felt. For years, he had kept his talent hidden, playing in secret, not wanting anyone to notice or question it. But here, in this room, with this unexpected listener, he felt a strange sense of freedom. "Would you like to play something together?" she asked suddenly, a playful glint in her eye. He blinked, surprised. He hadn't expected her to suggest that. I don't know, he said hesitantly. I don't know if you play. She laughed softly, a sound that was light and musical, and shook her head. I don't play, but I want to see you play fully. I want to hear the music you've been keeping to yourself. He swallowed, feeling a mix of nerves and excitement. Her words were encouraging, but they also carried a weight, a sense of expectation that made his palms sweat. Yet, at the same time, he felt a surge of determination. This was his chance to show what he could do, to step out of the shadows he had always occupied. He took a deep breath and moved closer to the piano, letting his fingers hover over the keys. The first notes were tentative, careful, as if testing the waters. But as he continued, the music began to flow more naturally, more confidently. He played a piece he had practiced countless times, one that told a story of quiet struggles, hidden dreams, and small triumphs. Each note seemed to carry a piece of his life, a fragment of the emotions he had kept locked away. She listened intently, her eyes fixed on him, her expression a mix of admiration and wonder. He felt a sense of liberation as he played, the kind that comes when someone finally sees the truth of who you are. The room seemed to hum with the sound, each note resonating off the walls, filling the space with warmth and energy. For the first time, he felt that his music had a purpose beyond his own private comfort. It could touch someone else, make them feel something, and that realization gave him courage. When he finished, there was a moment of silence, filled only by the faint echo of the last note. She clapped lightly, a genuine gesture that made his chest swell with pride and gratitude. That was incredible, she said, her voice soft but firm. You have a gift, and it's rare to see someone use it so naturally. He looked down at his hands, feeling a bit shy. Thank you, he murmured. I've never played in front of anyone here. I wasn't sure if anyone would care. She shook her head, leaning back in the chair slightly. I care, she said simply. And I think you should share this more often. Not for me, not for anyone else, but for yourself. You can't hide something this beautiful forever. Her words lingered in his mind, echoing with a truth he had avoided acknowledging. For years, he had played quietly, almost ashamed of his talent, as if it were something he didn't deserve to show. But her recognition, her genuine interest, made him realize that he had been undervaluing himself. He had a skill, a passion, something that could bring joy, and it was time to accept it. Encouraged by her words, he began to play again, this time more freely, letting the music flow without hesitation. Each note carried more emotion, more confidence. He experimented with variations, improvising slightly, and felt a thrill as the piano responded to his touch. She leaned forward, captivated, and he noticed the sparkle in her eyes, the way she seemed to absorb every sound, every nuance. Her presence was not intimidating anymore. It was motivating, inspiring him to play his best dot. As he continued, he noticed the subtle changes in her posture, the slight movements of her fingers tapping along with the rhythm, the soft nods of encouragement. It was as if she were silently conducting him, guiding him through the music without saying a word. He felt a deep sense of connection, a rare and beautiful moment where two people from completely different worlds shared something intimate and powerful without needing words. When he finally paused, breathing heavily, there was a quiet awe in the room. She sat back, her hands resting gently on her lap, and smiled warmly. You play with more than just skill, she said. You play with feeling. That's what makes it special. Most people can follow notes, but few can tell a story like you do. He felt a lump in his throat, overwhelmed by the sincerity of her words. He had never been praised like this, not for work, not for skill, not for anything. And yet here she was, acknowledging something deeply personal, something that had always been a private refuge. He nodded, trying to find the right words to respond, but none came immediately. Instead, he simply smiled, letting the music and her appreciation speak for themselves. She rose from the chair and walked around the piano, her fingers lightly brushing the polished wood as if to feel the vibrations of the music. "I want to hear more," she said, a playful challenge in her voice. "Play for me again. Don't hold back this time." He laughed softly, a nervous but genuine sound. He hadn't realized how much he wanted to share, how much he had been holding back. But now, with her encouragement, he felt a renewed energy, a desire to pour everything into the music. He positioned his hands on the keys once more, feeling the familiar texture, the smoothness under his fingers, and began to play. This time, the music was richer, more expressive. He allowed himself to improvise, to experiment with dynamics and tempo, weaving a melody that was both delicate and powerful. The notes seemed to dance around the room, filling the space with energy and emotion. She listened silently, completely absorbed, and he could feel the room responding to every note, as if the mansion itself were alive and celebrating the music. He noticed subtle details in her reaction, the way her eyes followed his hands, the slight tilt of her head when a note struck particularly true, the soft smile that grew as the piece unfolded. It was not just admiration. It was connection, an understanding of the effort, passion, and feeling behind every key. In that moment, he realized that music could create bonds stronger than words, bridges between worlds that seemed impossible to cross. When he finally finished, the room was silent again, but this time it was a silence filled with respect and wonder. She leaned forward slightly, her hands resting on her knees, and said, "That was amazing. I didn't know music could sound like that." He felt a warm flush of pride and relief. "I'm glad you like it," he said quietly. "It's something I've always loved, even if I never thought anyone else would care." Her smile grew, a mixture of encouragement and admiration. "You have to keep playing," she said firmly. "Don't let it stay hidden. You have a gift that can touch people, not just me, but anyone who listens. You owe it to yourself to share it." He nodded, feeling the weight of her words, the truth in them. For the first time, he thought seriously about the possibility of letting his music be more than a private escape. Perhaps it was time to step into the world, to take a risk, and to embrace something he had always kept hidden. Her belief in him sparked a fire he didn't realize he had, a desire to see where his talent could lead Dot as he wiped his hands on the cloth and stepped back from the piano. She approached, resting a hand gently on the edge of the instrument. "Thank you," she said softly, "for sharing this with me. You've made this room, this morning, unforgettable." He felt a rush of gratitude and humility. "Thank you for listening," he replied, "for caring. I didn't expect anyone here to care about something like this." She shook her head, smiling warmly. "Some things are worth noticing. Some people are worth noticing. You've reminded me of that today." He felt a sense of peace and connection he hadn't known in years. The music had created a bridge, and it had brought him closer to someone who seemed impossible to reach. The piano, the room, and the unexpected friendship that had begun in the quiet of the morning now felt like the start of something extraordinary, something that could change the way he saw himself and the world around him. It was a beginning, and he could feel it in every beat of his heart and every echo of the notes that lingered in the air. The room had transformed from a quiet, polished space into something alive and vibrant. The soft echoes of the piano still lingered in the air, creating a gentle hum that made it feel as though the mansion itself had taken a deep breath and held it in admiration. He stood back for a moment, letting his hands rest at his sides, feeling a mix of exhilaration and vulnerability. Sharing his music something he had guarded for years, had been both terrifying and liberating. He wasn't sure what she thought of him now, but her eyes glimmered with admiration. A rare and unexpected gift. She leaned slightly against the piano, studying him with a thoughtful expression. "You know," she said softly, "most people never take the chance to show what they can really do. They hide their talents, their passions, afraid someone will judge them, or it won't matter. But you've given yourself fully to the music." He shifted his weight, feeling both proud and self-conscious. "I guess I've always been careful," he admitted. "I never wanted anyone to expect something from me I couldn't give. And I didn't think anyone here would even notice." Her gaze softened, a small, genuine smile tugging at her lips. "I notice," she said simply. "And I think it's rare to find someone who's not only talented, but also sincere about what they love. You play with honesty, and that's something no one can teach." He took a deep breath, letting her words sink in. For the first time, he felt like his life outside this mansion, his quiet routines and small victories, were not invisible. His music had spoken louder than any words could, and she had heard it. He didn't know why, but it felt like a turning point, a moment that would stay with him forever. As he moved toward the piano again, something unexpected happened. One of the other staff members, who had been quietly working in the adjacent hallway, peeked into the room. She froze for a moment, watching the scene unfold. The sight of the janitor playing with such skill, and the rich girl standing there, fully attentive, was something that drew her in like a magnet. She hadn't expected to see this side of the quiet janitor, the one who moved through the house, almost unnoticed. Her eyes widened in surprise, and she instinctively stepped closer, careful not to disturb the moment. He noticed the movement out of the corner of his eye, but continued playing, letting the music fill the space. There was a strange thrill in knowing that someone else was witnessing this talent. It wasn't just about the girl who had entered the room first. It was about the realization that his music could affect others, could reach beyond the boundaries he had always imagined. Each note felt heavier now, carrying meaning beyond his own practice, and yet it remained joyful, a gift he was sharing without asking for anything in return. The rich girl watched closely, her expression a mix of pride and delight. She leaned slightly closer, resting a hand on the polished surface of the piano. "Do you see?" she whispered almost to herself, but loud enough for him to hear. "This is what happens when someone dares to be themselves. This is the magic that hides in plain sight." He paused for a moment, letting her words resonate, and then smiled faintly. "I never thought of it that way," he admitted. "I just played because it felt right, because it's what I do." Her smile widened, her eyes reflecting the sunlight streaming through the windows. "And that's exactly why it matters. It's not about showing off or proving something to others. It's about letting the world see a part of yourself that only a few people might ever witness. You've done that today." He nodded, a lump forming in his throat. There was so much truth in her words, so much validation that he had been longing for without even realizing it. His music had been a secret world, one that he had shared only with himself. Yet now it had become a bridge, connecting him to someone who not only appreciated it, but understood it on a deeper level. The staff member, who had been watching from the hallway, finally stepped fully into the room, unable to resist the allure of the music. She was careful, respectful, moving quietly so as not to startle him. The moment the door closed behind her, she froze, her eyes fixed on the scene in front of her. The janitor, usually so quiet and reserved, was completely absorbed in the music, his fingers moving deftly over the keys. And the rich girl, standing there, captivated by every note, seemed genuinely moved. The sight was almost unreal, a scene that seemed lifted from a dream. He caught her gaze briefly and nodded slightly, acknowledging her presence. She returned the nod with a quiet smile, feeling both honored and surprised to witness something so beautiful. The music continued, growing more complex, more expressive. He had started improvising slightly, adding subtle flourishes and variations, feeling the energy of the room guiding him. It was as if the presence of the listeners, far from distracting him, had inspired him to play with more passion and creativity. The rich girl's expression softened further. She had seen many things in her life: wealth, privilege, accomplishments, but rarely had she witnessed something so raw, so genuine. She realized that true talent wasn't always visible in grand displays or certificates. Sometimes it hid, quietly in unexpected places, waiting for someone to recognize it. And now she had, and the impact was undeniable. He finished the piece with a soft, lingering note, letting the last vibration fade into the warm sunlight that filled the room. Silence followed, but it was not an empty silence. It was a silence filled with awe, respect, and a quiet appreciation of something rare and precious. The two women in the room exchanged a glance, sharing an unspoken understanding of the moment they had just witnessed. The rich girl clapped lightly, breaking the silence. "Incredible," she said, her voice steady but full of emotion. "I didn't know it was possible to feel this much from music, to be so affected by it. You've opened my eyes today." He felt a flush of warmth, a mixture of pride, relief, and something he could only describe as deep satisfaction. "I'm glad you felt it," he said quietly. "That's all I ever hope for when I play." She moved closer, placing a hand on his shoulder in a gesture of encouragement. "You should never hide this," she said firmly. "It's a gift, and it deserves to be shared, not just with me, but with anyone who would appreciate it." He nodded, feeling the weight and truth of her words. He had spent so long thinking that his music was just a personal escape, a way to cope with the mundane aspects of life. But now he realized it could be more. It could inspire, touch hearts, and connect people in ways that words could not. Her encouragement had ignited something inside him, a desire to step beyond the shadows and let the music speak for itself. The staff member, still standing quietly near the door, finally spoke. "Never knew," she began, her voice soft but full of admiration. "I never knew you could play like that. It's incredible." He turned to her, offering a modest smile. "Thank you," he said. "It's not something I show often, but I'm glad you could hear it." Her eyes brightened, and she nodded. "It's more than hearing it. It's feeling it. You can't hide that kind of talent. It's alive, and it reaches people." He felt a sense of warmth and connection growing, not just with the rich girl, but with the staff as well. Music had created a moment that transcended social boundaries, one where admiration, respect, and shared experience mattered more than status or background. The room, once just a polished and elegant space, had become a place where hearts met and emotions flowed freely. The rich girl stepped back from the piano and looked at him with a thoughtful expression. "You know," she said, "there's something powerful about this. Most people spend their lives chasing recognition, but the truth is, true talent shines even when no one is watching. You've proven that." He smiled faintly, feeling the truth of her words. "I've always played for myself," he admitted, "but now I see that sharing it doesn't take away from the experience. It adds to it." She nodded, satisfied. "Exactly. And I want to see more of it. You have something special, something that can touch people's hearts. Don't keep it hidden any longer." He felt a surge of gratitude, a deep and quiet joy that seemed to fill the room alongside the fading echoes of the piano. He realized that this moment, this connection, was rare and precious. It wasn't just about playing music. It was about being seen, being appreciated, and understanding that his passion had value beyond himself. As he wiped his hands and stepped back from the piano, he felt a renewed sense of purpose. The music had done more than fill the room. It had opened doors within himself, doors he hadn't dared to approach before. He glanced at the rich girl and the staff member, seeing genuine admiration in their eyes, and felt a warmth that had nothing to do with sunlight or the polished wood around him. It was a human warmth, a recognition of talent, effort, and heart. The room remained silent for a few moments, each person processing the experience in their own way. Then she spoke again, her voice calm but filled with conviction. Today has been remarkable. You've reminded us all that greatness can come from the most unexpected places. Don't forget this moment, and don't forget what you're capable of. He nodded, feeling the truth in her words. He would not forget this day, this music, this acknowledgement. It was a turning point, a moment when his life, which had seemed ordinary and unnoticed, had intersected with something extraordinary. And he knew, deep down, that this was just the beginning of a journey he had long kept in the shadows, a journey that now had light and recognition guiding it. He had never imagined that a simple act of cleaning could lead to this. The music had filled the room, touched the hearts of those present, and revealed something within him he had never dared to show. For a moment, he just stood there, letting the weight of the experience settle in. The rich girl's eyes were bright with admiration, and the staff member who had quietly entered now stood closer, listening as though the room had become sacred. It was a strange, almost surreal moment, yet it felt more real than anything he had experienced in a long time. She stepped forward, closer to the piano, her hands resting lightly on its polished surface. "You know," she said, her voice calm and steady, "most people are too afraid to let anyone see what they can truly do. They hide behind safety, routines, and silence. But you've given yourself to the music, fully. That takes courage." He shifted uncomfortably, unused, to praise of this kind. "I didn't think anyone would care," he admitted quietly. "I've always played for myself. It's my way of thinking, my escape." Her gaze softened. "And yet here we are. And we care. I care. You've shown us something extraordinary." He looked at her, unsure what to say. Words felt inadequate, unable to convey the mix of pride, fear, and humility he felt. Instead, he simply nodded, letting the music and the shared silence speak for him. She took a small step closer, her presence encouraging but not overwhelming. "Do you trust me?" she asked suddenly. He blinked, surprised. I think so," he said cautiously. "Why?" "Because," she said, smiling gently, "I want you to play something more ambitious. Something you've never played in front of anyone. Not just a few notes, not just a melody. I want to hear your story through the piano. Can you do that?" He hesitated. The idea was daunting. Playing in front of anyone, especially someone so confident and observant, made his heart race. But there was a strange pull, an invitation to step further than he ever had. He swallowed hard, then nodded slowly. "I'll try," he said, his voice barely above a whisper. She gave him a nod of encouragement, and he moved to the piano once again. His fingers hovered over the keys, trembling slightly with anticipation. The room was quiet, but the quiet was no longer intimidating. It felt expectant, alive with possibility. He pressed the first key, and the sound rang clear and pure. Then another and another, until he had begun a full piece, one he had practiced countless times but never dared to share. As the music flowed, he felt something shift inside him. The fear that had gripped him faded, replaced by a growing sense of confidence. He let the melody guide him, his fingers moving with precision and emotion. Each note carried a story of long nights spent practicing alone, of small victories, and quiet joys of the world he had created for himself through music. The room seemed to respond, as though the sunlight streaming through the windows and the polished surfaces of the piano amplified the emotion in every chord. She watched him intently, her eyes reflecting both wonder and admiration. She had seen many things in her life, wealth and privilege, power and accomplishment, yet nothing had prepared her for this moment. Here was someone so unassuming, so quiet in the world, creating beauty that touched her soul. She leaned slightly forward, her hands resting lightly on her knees, captivated by the depth of expression he was able to convey. The staff member, too, was mesmerized. She had worked alongside him for months, perhaps years, yet had never imagined this hidden side of him. She stood quietly, listening, feeling as if the music had reached into her own heart, drawing forth emotions she had long kept hidden. The janitor, usually invisible and reserved, was suddenly the center of an unseen spotlight, commanding attention with something far more powerful than any words. As he continued, he experimented with dynamics, letting some notes rise boldly and others fall softly. He allowed himself small improvisations, flourishes that added emotion and character to the piece. It was no longer just a practiced sequence of notes. It had become alive, breathing with energy and passion. He felt a sense of liberation, as if every note freed him from the constraints he had placed on himself for so long. She clapped lightly when he paused briefly, her face bright with encouragement. "That's it," she said softly. "Don't hold back. Let it all come through. This is your moment, and it belongs to you." Her words emboldened him, and he plunged back into the music with renewed intensity. The melody soared and dipped, carrying emotion and story with it. He could feel the connection between himself and his audience growing stronger, the room vibrating not just with sound, but with shared experience. For the first time, he felt that his music had a purpose beyond himself, a power to touch hearts and create moments that would be remembered. Minutes passed, though it felt like hours, as he played with full devotion. When he finally ended the piece with a lingering, soft note, the room remained silent for a long moment, filled with the echo of the music and the weight of what had just occurred. Then she spoke, her voice steady and filled with awe. That was incredible. I have never heard anything like it." He felt a flush of relief and pride, mixed with the lingering nervousness of vulnerability. "I'm glad you liked it," he said quietly. "I wasn't sure anyone would." She shook, her head slightly, her expression sincere. "More than liking it, you've given us something rare, something we won't forget. Your music. It's alive and it moves people." He felt a lump in his throat. All his life he had played in secret, fearing judgment or indifference. But here, in this room, surrounded by people who had witnessed and appreciated his gift, he felt validation that went beyond words. His music had bridged the gap between their worlds, connecting hearts and experiences that seemed otherwise impossible to reach. She stepped closer to the piano, resting a hand gently on its surface. "I want you to keep playing," she said softly. "Not just here, not just for me, but for yourself. Don't let this talent go unnoticed any longer." He nodded, feeling a wave of gratitude and hope. He had never considered sharing his music beyond the quiet confines of his personal space. Now, encouraged by someone who truly saw his worth, he realized the possibilities that lay before him. The fear that had always held him back began to fade, replaced by determination and excitement. The staff member who had been quietly observing finally spoke, her voice filled with awe. "I didn't know. I had no idea you could play like that. It's amazing." He turned to her with a modest smile. "Thank you. I've always kept it private, but I'm glad you could hear it." Her eyes shone with admiration. It's more than hearing it. It's feeling it. You can't hide something like this. It's alive, and it reaches people. He felt a deep warmth in his chest. The recognition, the genuine appreciation, was something he had longed for without fully realizing it. His music had always been a personal refuge, but now he understood its power to connect, to inspire, and to create shared experience. The moment had transformed the room, the people in it, and himself in ways he hadn't anticipated. The rich girl looked at him thoughtfully, her expression serious but kind. "You know," she said, "most people spend their lives chasing recognition, but real talent shines even when no one is watching. You've proven that, and more. You've reminded us that extraordinary things can come from unexpected places." He nodded, feeling the truth of her words. "I've always played for myself," he said quietly. "But now I see that sharing. It can mean something. It doesn't take away from the experience, it adds to it." Her smile widened, a rare warmth in her eyes. "Exactly. Don't let this gift go unnoticed. You have something special, and it deserves to be shared. Not for us, not for applause, but for yourself and the joy it can bring." He felt a sense of peace and purpose settling within him. The music had not only filled the room, but had opened doors inside himself that he had never dared approach. The encouragement he received, the admiration he had earned, and the connection he had made with those present had ignited a spark he could not ignore. This was more than just a moment. It was a turning point, the beginning of a new chapter. As he stepped back from the piano, he looked at the rich girl and the staff member, seeing genuine respect and appreciation in their eyes. The room seemed warmer, brighter, and alive with shared emotion. He realized that his music had created a bridge, one that connected people across social boundaries, touched hearts, and left a lasting impression. She spoke again, her voice calm but filled with conviction. "Today has been extraordinary. You've reminded us all that greatness can come from unexpected places. Don't forget this moment, and don't forget what you're capable of." He nodded, feeling the weight and truth of her words. He would not forget this day, this music, or the way he had been seen and appreciated. It was a moment that would guide him forward, giving him courage to explore new possibilities and embrace his talent fully. And in that quiet, sunlit room, with the piano still echoing its final notes, he felt something he had never felt before, a sense of belonging, purpose, and hope for the future. The sunlight streaming through the tall windows cast a warm glow on the grand piano, illuminating its glossy black surface as he sat quietly, hands resting lightly on the keys. For a long moment he didn't play. He just sat, feeling the weight of the day, the experience, and the unexpected recognition he had received. The room, once a place of strict silence and careful cleaning, had transformed into a space filled with shared memories, emotions, and connection. She stood nearby, leaning casually against the wall, her eyes fixed on him with a mix of admiration and quiet encouragement. The staff member who had entered earlier now stood at the doorway, watching in awe but giving them space, understanding that this moment belonged entirely to him. He could feel the anticipation in the air, not just his own, but the energy of everyone present. It was a rare kind of attention, one that was not demanding or judgmental, but respectful, curious, and full of possibility. He inhaled deeply, letting the calm of the room settle over him, and then allowed his fingers to move. The first notes were soft, tentative, but filled with feeling. He had never played with such an awareness of who was listening, yet it felt natural. Each note seemed to carry a story, a memory, a part of his life that had been hidden away. The room seemed to respond to him, the sunlight reflecting off the polished surface, the quiet admiration of his audience pushing him to give more. The melody grew, gentle at first, then building in confidence and emotion. He allowed himself small flourishes, improvisations that added personality and life to the music. The rhythm rose and fell with the feelings he had stored inside, emotions he had never dared to share outside of the quiet solitude of his apartment. And now, with the rich girl and the staff member watching, it felt as though the music had a new purpose. It was no longer just a private refuge. It had become a gift, a connection, a bridge between different worlds. She moved closer, resting a hand lightly on the edge of the piano, her eyes never leaving his. "This is incredible," she said softly. "I can't believe how much emotion you put into every note. You don't just play music, you tell a story." He felt a flush of pride and humility. I've always felt that way," he admitted quietly. "Music isn't just notes to me. It's life, emotions, everything I can't say with words." Her smile was warm, sincere, and it gave him courage. "And you've shared that with us today. That's something extraordinary. You've let us into your world, and it's beautiful." He nodded, feeling the weight and truth of her words. For years, he had kept this part of himself hidden, afraid of judgment or disinterest. But now, he saw that sharing it didn't make him vulnerable in a bad way. It connected him. It mattered. It created something real. The realization filled him with a quiet, steady joy. The music swelled as he continued, each note resonating with confidence and freedom. He had allowed himself to improvise, to explore the piano in ways he had never dared before, and it felt exhilarating. The sound filled the room, carrying both strength and delicacy, telling the story of his life through melody. Every chord seemed to express the years of hard work, the moments of solitude, and the quiet determination that had brought him to this day. She leaned closer, resting her chin on her hand, completely absorbed. "It's amazing," she whispered. "I've never felt something so alive coming from music before. You don't just play, you breathe life into it." He smiled faintly, feeling the warmth of her words. "I never thought anyone would notice," he said softly. "I always played for myself. It was my escape." "But it's more than an escape," she said gently. "It's a gift. And gifts are meant to be shared, not hidden away. Today, you've shared yours, and it's incredible. Don't ever forget that." The staff member at the doorway nodded in agreement, a quiet smile on her face. "I've seen a lot of things in this house, but I've never seen anything like this."